expect fair skies Monday through Wednesday with temperatures in the 60s on Monday.
It's 10 minutes to the top of the hour. Time to take a look at our tropical update. We still have our hurricane on our hands. That is Juan, just north of Bermuda. But the big cluster of storms right around the Cape Verde Islands is actually a tropical storm now to talk about, and that's Kate. And the cluster of storms you'll find right just south of Cuba is something definitely we need to watch, especially if you live in the Florida area. I'll give you all the details in just a moment. Hurricane Juan right now moving to the north-northwest at 9 miles per hour. Still a fairly strong Category 2 hurricane. 105 mile per hour winds, 525 miles south of Halifax, and it's going to continue to make its way in towards Nova Scotia. Over the next 24 hours, you'll see how fast it begins to move. Right now, it's moving slow, but it's going to intensify or I should say, increase in speed and lose some of its intensity. It's got a very well-defined eye with it. As I mentioned, a fairly strong Category 2 hurricane right now, still well out to sea, mainly a marine hazard for now. But as you can tell with its projected path eventually heading up towards Halifax, we are expecting that we could see a few rip currents to be a bit of a problem here on Sunday around the New England states. So if you're heading out to those beach areas, just make sure you're aware of what's going on. Right now, though, we are expected the landfall to be sometime around Sunday during the afternoon, eventually by Monday. Look how far north it's expected to head northward. Keep in mind, though, that as it moves into these cooler waters further northward, it is expected to lose some of its intensity. And I was looking back to see when was the last time a storm held together still as a hurricane to hit this area, and that wasn't too long ago. If you remember, just a year ago, back in the year 2002, we had Hurricane Gustav. Well, it may not hold as a hurricane, but it is expected to weaken some as it makes its way northward. We'll just have to wait and see how much it weakens. Tropical Storm Kate right now is just north-northwest, moving north-northwest at 12 miles per hour. 1,150 miles east-northeast of the Leeward Islands, just out to sea with 50 mile per hour winds. And as I show you the satellite loop, you can see it's not as organized as our hurricane is. Nonetheless, still a lot of convection associated with this storm, and it's mainly a marine hazard at best. It's going to continue to move north and then take that northeast track. Now, a little closer to home, we do have this blob of convection, you could say. In the mid-levels of the atmosphere, we do have some trough, but it hasn't exactly made its way all the way to the surface. So we are still monitoring this to see if it even becomes a tropical-like system. But nonetheless, I did say Florida, be aware, because we do have a very strong front that is expected to push into the southern areas of Florida here over the next 24 hours. And with this drifting through the Yucatan, we're going to be dealing with the possibility of these two coming together. And that could mean some heavy showers to western areas of Florida over the next 48 hours. Right now, the Gulf of Mexico has a very active subtropical jet stream bringing more rain into Florida. We'll give you the details on that in just a moment. But the Pacific is quiet.
Evening Edition is sponsored by Chex Cereals. Everyone's on the same square.
So, are you telling us, Mr. Billy, that you have found something that you agree with your mom's on?
That is correct, Senator.
And what would that be?
Check. We like it, and our moms like that we like it.
Even without the marshmallow puffs and bright colors, you'll happily eat Chex?
That is correct, Senator.
You do realize that Chex is low in sugar?
Did you know that? No what?
There's one cereal they like that you want them to like. Chex. Everyone's on the same square.
Who voted for these guys?
On Tuesday, we'll see fair skies. Look for rainy conditions on Wednesday. And on Thursday, expect fair skies.
It's 50 minutes past the hour, and that means it's time for your tropical update.
And we want to check in with our hurricane expert, Dr. Steve Lyons. And Steve, you've been closely monitoring Hurricane Juan. Is expected to make landfall in the near future.
Yeah, within the next 12 to 24 hours up in the Nova Scotia area, and the good news is we think it's going to be weakening rather quickly as it moves up there. You see right now winds are 105 miles per hour, but the circulation of deep thunderstorms is relatively small, although the overall wind circulation is a little bit larger than that. Moving north at 12 miles per hour, I just want to show you a close-up here, and then what we think is going to happen to it as it comes to the coast. Notice up here how cold the sea surface temperatures are. When we see that, typically the winds lift off the surface, and the surface winds are not near as strong. So we expect it to be a hurricane of landfall, but we expect more of the people to get gusts to hurricane force than sustained winds to hurricane force. So what are the other impacts? Wave action. Let's look at the waves here starting this morning and moving through the next 24 to 36 hours. And you can see some of the wave action is actually going to catch the Cape Cod area and also down here near the Cape Hatteras area. But the big brunt of the wave action is going to be up here 25 feet near landfall in the Halifax area.
Very interesting to see that graphic, Dr. Lyons, and I guess it's a good point to remind everyone, too, that the tropical season is by no means over. But speaking of that, how about moving southward to the northwestern Caribbean? We've got a little action we're watching there, right?
Yeah, we've been monitoring that for a while, Bob, and the good news is, as we look out there, notice the thunderstorms are sort of lining up in a line now. That's more of a linear pattern than a single cluster of showers. That's good news. That means organization is relatively poor. But if there is anything forming, it's right about at that arrowhead there, so we're going to be monitoring that carefully. But look at how fast the winds are across the Gulf of Mexico. This thing is going to have to form down here in the Caribbean or in the very, very southern Gulf of Mexico to have a chance to do anything. Right now I think it's going to come up and pretty much produce some rain for the Florida Peninsula still. There's no surface low pressure center yet, which is good news. So we'll continue to monitor, but right now not showing any signs of developing.
Good.
And Steve, what about Tropical Storm Kate turning in the Central Atlantic?
Well, this tropical storm is what I would consider sort of a high seas only, and it's really a very, very much a dud. The strongest winds are only in a small core of thunderstorms on the northeast side. So if you're in a high seas area out there, just go to the southwest quadrant and you'll see winds of about 20 miles per hour. It's not that big a deal. Moving north at 9, 60 miles per hour in that core of thunderstorms in a very small area. It's moving to the north, but we think it's going to be meandering around out there for a while and not affecting any land areas, which is great news. Of course, the Eastern Pacific, if you're heading that way, is quiet today other than some showers offshore, so we're in great shape there. Bob and Melissa.
All right, thanks a lot. Hurricane expert Dr. Steve Lyons. Stormy day, though, across parts of the Northeast, though.
We've got rain and a chance of embedded storms due to a frontal boundary. Look at the moisture flow, and it's on the breezy side, too. New York City getting wet. Long Island, you can see upstate New York around Albany, some pretty heavy rain coming down. There's a close-up view of New York City, much of Long Island seeing a soaker today. Rain could be heavy at times throughout the morning. Look at that cluster of heavy rain in southwestern Connecticut. And flood watches remain in effect. The grounds are more than saturated in eastern Pennsylvania. And there's that sliver of storm action along the mid-Atlantic and Florida with a subtropical flow over Florida today.
Well, be sure to stay with us. Coming up on Weekend Now, Kelly Cass and Bill Keneally will have the latest forecast from coast to coast.
Plus, the newest member of the Weekend Now team joins us live from Milwaukee. But now,
hey, it's Chelsea Kinsley here with the Weather Channel Road Crew. Where are all these people going? I'm going to fill you in right here on Weekend Now.
Look at New York City, a little rain.
It is, and heavy downpours. Look on the 8th up next.
If you're like the average American household, you've got almost $8,000 in credit card debt. Did you know that at an 18% interest rate and making only minimum payments, it will take you 47 years to pay them off? At this rate, do you fear you will never get out of debt? Don't live in fear. Get help. Call Profina Debt Solution.
Expect fair skies Tuesday through Thursday with temperatures in the 60s on Tuesday.
It's 15 minutes past the hour, and that means it's time for your tropical update. I'm meteorologist Bob Stokes. Let's start off with some climatology, see where we are in the season, and then head toward the big Atlantic picture. Yes, we are still near the peak. We are a little past the peak, but remember, that doesn't mean that we can let our guard down. We're still very near the peak, even if we're a little thereafter, which is about September the 10th, and there's still the high probability or possibility of tropical storm or hurricane activity. In fact, we have both a tropical storm and a hurricane to tell you about. One is Tropical Storm Kate, which is in the eastern Pacific, or eastern Atlantic, and there's also Hurricane Juan, which is in the western part of the Atlantic. We're also watching an area of disturbed weather in the northwestern part of the Caribbean. Let's start you off with Hurricane Juan. Now 100 miles an hour. Now the winds around the center of circulation have been 105 miles an hour. It's headed toward much colder sea surface temperatures, so it's expected to weaken, but it's moving so fast that it'll probably be a hurricane by the time it reaches Nova Scotia. That's where it's headed in the next, say, 12 hours or less, moving toward the north at 20, so that's a pretty good clip. Now, the weakening has been going on. The eye is not as strong or defined, but you can still discern an eye, that's for sure. Take a look at it. You see it right there, but it's filling in somewhat. This is Nova Scotia. This is Maine, the coastline of Maine, where we could see seas of waves of 15 feet perhaps. Lesser seas as we head toward the Cape, but still several feet of seas. Bad news is, as it approaches Nova Scotia, it may be around astronomical high tide when it does so, and that could exacerbate the surge. So that's not good news, but there's a look again at Hurricane Juan. Now, likely to be a minimal hurricane when it reaches Nova Scotia in the next 10 to 12 hours, but still a hurricane. It still is very well defined, although on a weakening phase. The strongest part of Hurricane Juan is on the right side, but still we could see choppy seas all the way down to the mid-Atlantic, and so fishermen, not a good time to go out, that's for sure. Here's another look at Hurricane Juan in the northwestern part of the Atlantic, again headed toward Nova Scotia, expected to stay away from the northeastern U.S. Here's that projected path, probably sometime tonight, overnight tonight, reaching Nova Scotia, probably around astronomical high tide, which only will exacerbate that surge. High surf, high waves along the New England coast of the U.S. Now here's Tropical Storm Kate, 60-mile-per-hour winds. It could strengthen a little bit, but it's days away from any land. So north-northeasterly wind, north-northeasterly movement at 10 miles an hour, and you can see pretty raggedy right now. Tropical Storm Kate in the eastern part of the Atlantic. Here's a check of what's going on, a broad diffuse area of disturbed weather in the northwestern Caribbean. Winds aren't so strong here, so there's a small window it could develop, but right now it's not looking very likely that it's imminent. But we'll be watching it. Even if it does so, the moisture expected to be caught up in this flow, this west to east flow in the Gulf. Some of that moisture could move toward Florida. Some of it could actually lean toward the west, but definitely it looks like Cuba, the Yucatan, looking at some rainfall. Generally speaking, some troughiness in the Gulf. You can see those westerly winds. Even if it reached the Gulf, probably would be sheared. And we have what is now a typhoon, which is just now passing Iwo Jima. We'll be watching this carefully for you as we head toward the western Pacific. Here's a check of the U.S. of A. Look at this big old trough of low pressure. This is representative of cold air coming down. Plus on the east side of that trough at the surface, we've got a front that's been bringing wet weather and flooding to the Connecticut River Valley, where flash flood warnings are in effect for many of you in the Connecticut River Valley. Heavy rain coming down. Be careful on those roads. Travel not advised. Stay with us.
From generation to generation, some things never change. At New York Life, it's our values. Financial strength, integrity, and humanity. Values rooted in our tradition as a mutual company, serving only the interests of our customers. Values that make New York Life.
Expect fair skies Tuesday through Thursday, with temperatures in the 60s on Tuesday.
Good evening. You're watching the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Cheryl Lemke, and it's time now for your tropical update. And once again, things are becoming quite active across the tropics. Actually, for tonight, we have 3 areas of concern. First of all, we have a tropical storm not too far from the Cape Verde Islands. We also have Hurricane Juan, that continues to race its way closer towards Nova Scotia. Then we also have a large area of disturbed weather, too, poised across the southwestern parts of the Caribbean. But first of all, here's Hurricane Juan. It is still packing winds of 100 miles per hour. It is moving quickly. It is racing off to the north at some 23 miles an hour. Now, currently, there is a frontal boundary draped across the eastern seaboard, and that is helping to steer and deflect Juan. So we do expect Juan to continue with that northerly movement at least the next 12 to 24 hours or so. And because of that, we do expect it to be making landfall around Nova Scotia later on tonight. The biggest concern that we have, very gusty winds and perhaps very heavy amounts of rainfall. Certainly, too, there could be a huge storm surge because we do expect this to be making landfall very close to the time of astronomical high tide. From our latest satellite picture, we do see Hurricane Juan again swirling in place. There is some good news, though, with this in that it will be encountering some cooler waters across the northern Atlantic. So because of that, it could weaken a little bit before it eventually makes landfall later on this evening. Elsewhere, though, we have Tropical Storm Kate. This one's packing 60 miles per hour winds. And the good news with this tropical storm in that it's a long ways away from any land areas, well over 1,000 miles southwest of the Azores. From our satellite perspective, this one, too, not looking that terribly impressive. It has been undergoing some wind shear. Right now, the deepest convection still well to the east of the center of circulation. So not very well organized at this particular point, but we do expect perhaps some slight strengthening in about the next day or so regarding Tropical Storm Kate. Elsewhere, though, we head over towards the Caribbean. Again, we have this large area of disturbed weather. In fact, it's been very persistent over the last several days or so. Whether or not it develops any more so, that's still rather questionable at this particular point. One thing, though, there's still no low-level circulation with this area of disturbed weather. But at least we do think, climatologically speaking, it is in a fairly favorable area in that respect. At the very least, we'll be seeing some very heavy rains with this tropical disturbance. Very heavy rains coming in the next day or so towards the Yucatan Peninsula, and more locally heavy rains, too, coming in through western Cuba. Then across the Gulf of Mexico, pretty quiet. Most of the eastern Pacific, too, has really calmed down in the wake of Hurricane Marty. Lastly, though, we head off towards the western Pacific, and just to get your bearings, this is the island of Japan. Well, right now there is a typhoon not too far away. This is Typhoon Kopu. It's packing winds of 90 miles per hour. The good news with this typhoon, though, we do expect it to be curving off towards the east. It should be passing to the east of Japan. That's a look at the weather throughout the tropics. Now let's head back to the States with Stephanie.
Well, here we go to the lower 48, where we are seeing some stormy weather in the northeast, throughout the Midwest, and also into the south, all due to a couple frontal boundaries. That's helping spark the clouds and the showers. And with this wet weather in the northeast, we've seen heavy downpours, and we continue to see the very heavy rain and possibly some thunderstorms as well. So definitely be careful for isolated storms, really throughout western New York all the way down into West Virginia, Kentucky. Same story into the panhandle of Texas, into portions of Colorado and New Mexico, and also into South Florida. That's where it looks like we will see the heaviest of rainfall into really tomorrow evening. It looks like we will see pretty consistent rain falling throughout South Florida, also into portions of the northeast. We have a couple flood watches in Florida and also in the northeast, so definitely watch for those.
And stay with us. There's more to come in the second half hour of Weather Center. Your weekly planners coming up.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This program was brought to you by Suzuki, who is proud to introduce the all-new Verona. This midsize sedan is huge.
Yes, you're lovely, never ever change. Keep that breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it? 'Cause I love you just the way you look tonight. Just the way you look tonight.
The best values on the road are at Suzuki. Make the smart move. Check out the full line of Suzuki cars and SUVs now.
Airwick's new Nightlight Scented Oils come in great scents like Plumeria and Wild Rose, and a rather fun